All right, today's run, we are doing 5 miles easy. I'm also going to be doing some hill strides as well as a dynamic warm-up and a strength workout, little garage lift later in the day. But one of the things that's been on my mind today that's been coming up a lot in my coaching practice is zone 2 running, easy running. And I'm sure you're tired about hearing about zone 2 running because every influencer in the world is talking about it. But look, us runners have been talking about zone 2 in different words for decades. We've been calling zone 2 easy running, base running, conversational running, fun runs, group runs, shakeouts, long, slow distance. We have 1,001 names for zone 2 running. And I like to tell runners, look, zone 2 is basically comfortable, controlled, conversational running. That's how we know what zone 2 is from an effort perspective. Follow those 3 C's and you are going to be well on your way to executing a really great zone 2 run. But in this video, I want to talk about some of the big mistakes runners make with zone 2 because I don't want you to make those mistakes either. Okay, let's start with maybe the biggest misconception about zone 2 running, and that zone 2 is a constant, but it's not. Your zone 2 effort is going to change over time, even over relatively short periods of time, like a 2 to 3 month season, because zone 2 is really about a physiological zone of effort. And that physiology is going to change based on your fitness and a whole host of other factors. So let's get into that and talk a little bit more about what is going to change your zone 2 range. All right, so because zone 2 is this range of physiological effort that's mostly based on lactate levels, a little bit based on heart rate. We often use heart rate as a proxy for those lactate levels because we're not out in the field testing our lactate or doing thumb pricks during a workout. You know, we are not Jakob Ingebrigtsen for the most part. So because of that, that means that band of effort is going to change all the time. So when you go out running and it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, your zone 2 is going to be different than if it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. If you are running technical terrain, the energy cost of running that terrain, not to mention the fact that you're not going to be as efficient on that terrain, that's going to increase the effort of the run so that your zone 2 heart rate is going to be higher on that effort, which means your pace is going to be slower. Not to mention things like your overall fitness level. I mean, this is probably the biggest determinant of what your zone 2 pace really is how good a shape you're in. You know, are you ready for a peak performance? Are you a 4-minute miler or a 6-minute miler or a 9-minute miler or an 11-minute miler? That will all impact your zone 2 effort. And a lot of the times this changes over the course of a season. So if you're starting a season from a low level of fitness, you should expect your zone 2 pace to change 3 months later, 6 months later, etc. So let's remember that zone 2 changes over time. One of the biggest mistakes is simply thinking that once you calculate your zone 2 pace once, you know it forever, you know your heart rate range for zone 2, and then you can sort of just set it and forget it. I don't want you to make that mistake because it changes and you will sometimes be running a little bit too slow or a little bit too fast, and that's not in your best interest as a runner. We want to be running sort of like that Goldilocks just right effort when we're doing easy pace. I'd rather you be a little bit too slow than too fast because I think we are going to defeat the purpose of a zone 2 run if we're running it entirely in zone 3. So keep in mind that your zone 2 changes over time and periodically recalculate your heart rate zone for zone 2 so that whenever you're running in zone 2, you know it's actually accurate. I could not make these videos without your support. So first, let me say thank you. And this video is brought to you by our very own Performance Training Journal. I have always been in love with hard copy training journals for a few really good reasons. Number one, when I was a new runner and I started keeping an actual training journal like this, I learned so much more about the sport and myself just by that practice. It really forces you to reflect on your training, to think more deeply about what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And if you are constantly
reflecting on your training, praising yourself for what's going right, planning for the future, and then looking back on what has previously worked for you, you are gonna really know yourself as a runner, and you're gonna start to make wiser decisions about your training. I also created this training journal because I want you to focus on the training metrics that actually matter. The training metrics that help you improve, get better, and progress with your running. We don't have to focus on everything. We just need to focus on what matters. I also took a lot of inspiration from professional runners that I've talked to on the Strength Running podcast. They're adamant by completing a training journal and reflecting on what works for you and actually giving yourself some praise within your journal. You're essentially completing a gratitude journal. You are building up your confidence in your own abilities over time. And when you look back on that journal before a big goal race, you are going to be reading in your own words why you're capable, why you can do this. And I can think of nothing more confidence building than an act like that. So I hope you check out the new performance training journal. It is now available on Amazon. It debuted as the #4 new release in the running category, and I could not be more proud of it. So thank you again for subscribing to the Strength Running YouTube channel, and I hope you enjoy the performance training journal.
Now, the other big mistake that runners often make with zone 2 efforts is the fact that they think they have to stay in zone 2 for the entire easy run. And the truth of the matter is your easy running is going to span zone 1, zone 2, and zone 3 over the course of your season, and even in the course of a single easy run. So let's not fall under this misguided notion that zone 2 is the end-all be-all. It's important. Most of your easy running should be in zone 2, but it's not the ideal place to be 100% of the time. Now, practically, what does that actually mean? Practically, let's take my run today. I'm going for a very easy 5-mile run. Now, the first mile of this run, when I'm doing a little bit of filming, I'm just getting warmed up, is probably going to be in zone 1. I've been looking at my heart rate. I've got my Coros heart rate band on underneath my shirt here, and I can tell my heart rate has been under 130 beats a minute for the first half mile of this run so far. And that's zone 1 for me, and that's totally fine. So you might find that the first 5 to 10 minutes of your run might be in zone 1, but as you ease into the effort, as you fully warm up, you'll spend most of that run in zone 2. Now, zone 3 is also appropriate too. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of zone 3 running. It's more mechanically efficient, although it does produce more mechanical stress because you're running faster. Now, if you want to run some zone 3, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Let's just make sure it is a minority of your overall easy running volume, and let's have it come at the end of the run so that you're basically negative splitting your easy runs from zone 1 to a little bit of zone 3 at the end. This really helps you gain some of the benefits of zone 3 while taking care to warm up at the beginning of your run, but getting most of the benefits of zone 2 because that's primarily the purpose of easy runs. Now, our final big zone 2 running mistake is the fact that if you want to get the benefits of zone 2 running, if you want to get all those positive aerobic adaptations and really build that big aerobic foundation, you actually have to do a lot of zone 2 running because zone 2 running is by definition sustainable. It's easy. It doesn't produce a lot of wear and tear on your body. There isn't as much mechanical stress as those faster efforts. And because of that, it's not actually that stressful. And so to get those positive adaptations, i.e. improvements that we all really want as runners, we have to do a lot of that zone 2 running. Now, if you're an injury-prone runner or you don't have a lot of experience running more than, say, 20 or 30 miles a week, let's make it a goal to gradually increase our weekly mileage. And we can also use cross training to help bridge the gap. Now, you have to do more cross training to get the same benefit as running because specificity is important and you're not going to get the same adaptations if you are biking or doing the elliptical, but it can help bridge the divide between a low mileage runner who wants to run higher mileage who maybe can't. So I'm a big proponent of high volume training. Mileage is best, but we can bridge the gap with cross training. And this recognizes the fact that zone 2 running is easy, and so we need more of it to get the adaptations that we want. You know, when I sit down and I think about all the mistakes I've made in my running career, I've made all these zone 2 mistakes myself. I have spent time doing a lot of very, very slow running, and I just avoided zone 3. And then I had a phase of training where I thought I had to run really fast all the time, and I was probably in zone 3 for most of my running. That led to a small injury. So I want you to avoid many of the big mistakes I've made in my own running career. And after running for over 26 years and coaching for about 14 of those years, I want you to take these lessons to heart so that you can get more out of your training. And if you want any additional resources on zone 2, zone 3 even, and how to think about this distribution of effort, I want to point you to a podcast I did with physiologist Bradley Homer. He's also a 2:26 marathoner, and we discussed this last summer when everyone was freaking out about how your heart rate was climbing on these hot summer runs and people were slowing down. People were even doing a fair amount of walking to make sure that their heart rate stayed in zone 2. But this is not actually what you have to do. And don't miss another podcast with John Davis, a PhD, who is a very good runner in his own right, but has also worked with some really high-level national class runners on the physiology of zone 3 aerobic threshold and what's actually happening in your body. There are links to those podcast episodes underneath this video, as well as a monster article I wrote all about zone 2, so that if you want to learn everything possible about this zone so that you don't make any mistakes when trying to execute it properly in your training, you have left no stone unturned. So I hope this was helpful for you. If it was, please hit that subscribe button and let's keep getting faster.